Right, well, here we are. We are going to now show a test-driven version of the FizzBuzz program. We previously talked about how to write a basic Hello World program and how to write one version of a basic FizzBuzz program, but now we're going to delve into test-driven development. So we're going to wind up having two basic classes. One is going to be our app class, and one is going to be the class that actually does all the work behind the scenes. We want it to work similarly to our previous FizzBuzz app, and I'm going to put the link to how we made that one in our previous video, but we want it to be a little bit more functional. So I've navigated to my video code directory, listed it out. We can find that we have FizzBuzz, not test driven, and our hello world. So we're going to make a directory, and we're going to call it FizzBuzz TDD. So we're going to test drive this development. We're going to change directory into this. And now what we're going to do is we are going to use a program called Gradle. And we are going to run a curl script in order to retrieve a build.gradle file that includes core unit testing dependencies. So I will put the curl command into the description of this video. And if you have Gradle installed, which you should at this point, and if you don't, then you can go to the Gradle website and they'll tell you how to do it. You can run this particular curl script and it will generate for you everything that you need to do test-driven development. Now, if you're going to use Eclipse, as your IDE, you can then run Gradle Eclipse, and now it will prepare all the directories. If you go and list them, we have build.gradle and source, and then if we can see that we have a main and a test folder under our source. So now that we're there, we can go and open our Eclipse, and I have something else already open. We don't need that. We can go and open or import something that already has been made. We'll import an existing project into our workspace, and the way I did that is I made sure I went to Package Explorer here on the left. I right-clicked and clicked on Import, selected Existing Projects into Workspace, and I can browse. I can browse for this. So I'll go to the video code thing and pick FizzBuzz TDD. And now we'll click Finish, and we'll see what happens. We have now a source main Java and a source test Java folder. So we would want to begin by writing our tests. So if we look at our previous FizzBuzz not TDD thing, we just kind of started writing source and wound up with something that looked like this. Okay. But there's a way of making it more functional. There's a way of looping through things. There's a way of just making this whole thing much nicer. We could do it all in the main method, but generally main is just for running other things and maybe doing a bit of logic here or there. So we will first, we'll close this one, and we will make a test. And we can go and call our test FizzBuzzer test. So our thing we'll call a FizzBuzzer. And what we need to understand is that our user input is going to be different than our actual FizzBuzzer. We're going to use our FizzBuzzer to deal with the different possibilities of the input, but we're going to do the input on the app side, and then we're going to do the cool stuff on the back end in this FizzBuzzer class. So we have to write a test in order to engage in test-driven development. Now, we've been generally liking the idea of writing clean code. And so what we do is we follow the 3 laws of test-driven development. The first law is you may not write production code until you have written a failing unit test. Okay, so we write a failing unit test. So what do we want to test? We look at our checklist over here, and well, we don't want to ask user to input a positive number or a negative one to quit. But let's just say that, okay, so anything less than 1 is just an invalid input. So we can make our test if when input less than 1, return invalid input. Or we can, yeah, we'll return invalid input. That's perfectly fair to do. So then what we do is we will first test to see if we can make our FizzBuzzer. So we can go FizzBuzzer under test equals new FizzBuzzer. And now we notice already that we have this underlined in red. So we have to make our class FizzBuzzer. Now we can either do this manually by going into source main, or what we can do is actually hover over this text and click on create our class. So we'll create our class, but if we do that, it's going to naturally create it in the test folder here. You can see test. We don't want that. So we want to put it in main. And we'll want to call it FizzBuzzer, which is already there. We don't want a public static void main because we don't want it to run by itself. Okay, so we've made our class FizzBuzzer. And so we'll save it. Save this one. Okay, we can see we now can make this one. But we can't test it. We can't test it because we haven't imported JUnit. We haven't imported JUnit test, so we hovered over that and clicked on import org.junit.test. And if it doesn't let you do that, you can just add this particular line of code to the top of your test code. So now that we've made our new FizzBuzzer, we have to test it. So let's say you want to put an input of some sort of, let's say you wanted to input, I don't know, an integer called FizzBuzz number. FizzBuzz number. All right, now we can't do that. We can't do that. Why can't we do that? We'll mouse over it. we are going to need to create a field FizzBuzz number or something of that nature. Nope, that doesn't work. That doesn't work at all. So we're going to need to, I don't know, what do we need to do? We're going to need to go and I don't know, maybe call some sort of a command. So what do we call it? We'll call it FizzBuzz. We'll call our command FizzBuzz. So we can go under test and we'll invoke the method FizzBuzz. Okay, but we don't have a FizzBuzz method. We don't have a FizzBuzz method at all. Okay, so we're just going through this thing, trying to figure out what we can put in. And then realizing that we basically write failing code all the time. So we don't have a method FizzBuzz, so we can mouse over it and it'll create the method already for us if we click in here. And what we'll want to do is FizzBuzz a number. See, we're doing this with some sort of a goal in sight, but our test program doesn't realize that. So you have to go and add an argument to match it. And let's say we want to test the number 0. That's a good number to test. Then we have to assert something. Now, how does an assert work? Well, we can decide we want our FizzBuzz to output something. But now, when we've gone and said we want a string called test output to be what this outputs, now we got a problem. Why? Because this is a void method. It means it will not return us anything when it is executed, but we need it to return us a string. So we need to return this to some sort of a string, and we need it to return something. So we'll have it return null in the meantime, and then we can go look over here at our static import for assert equals, which you can copy this line. We have import static org.junit.assert equals. If you don't import this, then you won't have access to this idea that you can assert that some input is supposed to, or some output is supposed to be something that you specify. Okay. So now all right, what is wrong here? Well, this already made the whole thing for us. This already made the whole thing for us. It's exactly the same method, but whatever. We'll go in here and see that this is not doing anything. Now let's go and run our program, and we can see that it turned red. We can see that this is not doing anything. It failed the test, right? And we can see what should be here, our assertion error. It expects this value here, invalid input, but instead it returned null. Okay. our method FizzBuzz returned null because that's what we told it to return. So, in order to make it pass the test, we need to make it return invalid input instead. And if we run this test, now that we've saved it, we're going to get green. It returned what we expected, but this is a pretty bizarre FizzBuzzer, right? Now all that happens is no matter what you put in here, it's going to return invalid input, right? So we inputted 0. It'll happen when we input 0. It'll happen when we input anything because that's what we've told it to do. So now let's write another test. Okay. When input great, let's think ahead. When input is 1, then return 1. Sounds good. And now we just want to assert that our thing is 1 when the integer we put in is 1. Okay. Well, we do that. And clearly, this test is going to fail. Why? Because it says here expected 1, but was invalid input. Of course. So now we'll say, okay, if FizzBuzz number is, let's see, what do we do? If FizzBuzz number is less than 1, return invalid input, else return FizzBuzz number dot toString. I don't know if we can do that. We can't do that. So then we go and we see, okay, what do we do to turn a number we can do something else called we can call a method that the integer class uses, and it's called toString. And into that we pass FizzBuzz number. So because FizzBuzz is supposed to return a string of whatever it is we want to output, it's going to take our number, make it a string, and return it. So now, once we've done that, it should work. Ah, it doesn't. All right, what is wrong here? Ah, I need to put a semicolon. See, this whole thing is just about making one mistake after another and not really noticing what you're doing. So we'll go back here, we'll run the test again, and we see we made it pass. Okay. So now we write another failing unit test. Okay, what did we do? We made our number must be greater than 0. We did not make number -1 to make us quit yet because that's going to be on the app side of things. We made it print the number. We can check it again to see if it'll print 2. It'll print the number 2. When input is 2, then return 2. I will just copy this whole thing here, paste it in there, and we want to assert that when we put in the number 2, 2 is going to be our output. When we put in the integer 2, then 2 string is going to be our output. Now, it passed. Why? Because we've done this whole doodad here. But now we know, okay, we'll say that that's a satisfied. We'll put a check mark there. But now we know if it's divisible by 3, we want it to print fizz. So now we have to say else if, okay, else if what? If FizzBuzz number mod 3 is equal to 0. If FizzBuzz number mod 3 is equal to 0, then we will return, I'm being bad. I'm being horrible. I'm being bad. We don't write any code here until we've written a failing unit test. So we go back to our FizzBuzzer test. All right, what's wrong here? Oh, we need to go and finish writing our test. When input is 3, then return fizz. Okay. So now we'll do this whole thing again. Copy and paste. Except we want fizz to be our output when 3 is our input. So now we can save both of these files and run our FizzBuzzer test and find that we expected fizz, but our output was 3. We expected fizz, but our output was 3. So what we have to do is now we can go and say else if FizzBuzz number mod 3 equals 0, return fizz. Okay. And we ran our test, and all tests passed. Great. So now we can run another test to see if another thing divisible by 3 passes. When input is 6, then return fizz. Because we know 6 divided by 3 is 2 with a remainder of 0. So we can go and assert this. The same thing as what we had before, except we're going to put in the number 6. Put in the number 6 and run our test, and I'm assuming that this test is going to pass. Very good. Now, what happens when we have 5? We want our test to return buzz. So we're going to say if divisible by 3, instead print fizz. Okay. So now if divisible by 5, then print buzz. So public void when input is 5, then return buzz. Okay. We'll throw one of these copies in, except we want it to be buzz when input is 5. Okay. Save that. Play it, and didn't work. Expected buzz, but was 5. It expected our output to be buzz because that's what the FizzBuzz is supposed to want. So we wrote a failing test. And what did we do? What do we do here? Well, we have to go and put our other clause in here, else if FizzBuzz number mod 5 equals 0. And what are we going to do? We're going to return buzz. And we can go and make this a little nicer looking. So we have FizzBuzz number mod 5 is 0, then return buzz. We'll save this, go back to our FizzBuzzer test, run it, and that passes. So we can write another test just to check. So when input is 10, then return buzz. So we'll go copy this same test here, and we'll put it in here, and we'll replace 5 with 10 and expect to see buzz. Okay. That's nice, it worked. Now we can go and just test, just for the sake of being careful. If we're nervous when input is negative 10, then return invalid input. Because you know, negative 10 is divisible by 5, so we could just go check and see if this actually works, right? So we pop this in here, and we'll just change that to negative 10, and we change our assert to invalid input. Save and run, and it actually did work because of the order of our if statements. Our first if statement takes care of it being less than 1, and that would need to stay in the front. If it doesn't stay in the front, then we're going to run into all sorts of other problems. But we'll have to go and look at our final little dilemma, which is multiples of both 3 and 5. So when input is 15, so 3 times 5, that's 15. Then return FizzBuzz. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll take our test here. We'll take one of these tests, copy it in here. And technically we don't need to constantly declare this, but we'll talk about that in a different video. We can go and actually declare it before anything else, but right now we're just going to keep on declaring it just for the sake of keeping consistency. We want FizzBuzz to be our output if we throw in 15 into our FizzBuzz thing. So we save that, and that should fail. And you can go and look at this assertion here. It says it failed because it expected FizzBuzz, but was buzz. That's fun. It expected FizzBuzz, but was buzz instead. So we know that fizz happens when it's mod 3 and buzz happens when it's mod 5. So we have to go and look if it's mod 3 and mod 5 first. Else if FizzBuzz number mod 3 equals 0 and FizzBuzz number mod 5 equals 0. Zoom out a little bit. Then return FizzBuzz. And now we'll just back that up a little bit to make it look pretty, get all of our ifs. So now we have mod 3 and mod 5. Return FizzBuzz. Mod 5, return buzz. Mod 3, return fizz. Else, return the number. So we can look at this test, run this test, and find that 15 returns FizzBuzz. So 15 returns FizzBuzz, then 30 should also. 30 should also return FizzBuzz. So we'll just go and copy this whole code here, change 15 to 30, and FizzBuzz should be our test output, which it was. So we now have a functioning fizz buzzer that goes through all these different things. Now what we want to do is make our app. We want to make our app. So what do we want to do next? Well, we go back here to our main, and we can make our new class, and we can call it FizzBuzz App. And we're probably going to want to run everything from the main class just to make it a little easier. So we included a public static void main method. So in this, we're going to have to do things like what we made before. We're going to have to make a scanner. And we can call it, I don't know, console input. So now we have our something that scans console input. We got red text. So we got to import scanner from java.util. Okay, that's nice. And then what else do we need to do? We have a scanner, and now we're going to need a fizz buzzer because we're going to need to use it. So we can go fizz buzzer. What are we going to call it? We're going to call it we're just going to call it FizzBuzzer equals new FizzBuzzer. So we have an instance of a FizzBuzzer, and we're going to call it FizzBuzzer. Okay. So I guess the first thing we're going to want is for it to print out, to print line, please input a positive, we talked last time, integer. And then please input a positive integer. Input -1 to quit. Sounds reasonable. So now we can go and check to see if this does what it's supposed to. So it says, please input a positive integer, input -1 to quit. Okay, so we have all that there. That's good. Now, what do we want to do? We want to say something like we can go and declare it up here, integer FizzBuzz number, and we just have it as nothing there, but we declare it. We'll say, okay, fizz, what happens? FizzBuzz number equals console input dot next int. So that means the next integer, or if somebody enters an integer into the console the next time, our FizzBuzz number is going to be that. Or FizzBuzz number is going to be the next integer it puts in. Now we're not going to deal with non-integer input yet because that's a whole other bag of worms that's a little more complicated than what we would get to in the beginning. So right now we just have whatever our FizzBuzz number is equals our console input.nextInt. And we want it to, okay, I guess the first thing we're going to say is if FizzBuzz number equals -1, then we quit. But how do we quit? We don't just go and quit the main method. We'll just want to get out of the program entirely. We'll just want to get out of the program completely. So we'll forget about that -1 thing for a moment, and we'll say okay. How about if we'll forget -1 to quit. We won't deal with that yet. If FizzBuzz number is less than 1, system.out.print line, please input a positive integer. Out.print line, input -1 to quit. Now here's a problem. We've repeated ourselves. You can see we said please input a positive integer, input -1 to quit. Please input a positive integer, input -1 to quit. Okay, we've gone and we've done that. And that brings us to an interesting point, that we can use a do-while loop to make that work. Okay. And the way a do-while loop works, I'll actually go and I'll put it up here. I'll give you an example of one. I want to use the example in, there's lots of good ones. We'll use do-while statement in W3 schools. Okay. So the basic idea is you put a do, and then you do text once, or you do some commands once while some condition. Okay, so if I is less than 5, you go back and you do it again. And then you go back and you do it again. But as soon as I is 5 or more, you quit. Okay. So what if you decide that you're just going to say, okay, while a condition is true, we're going to do it. So if we say, okay, do, what are we going to do? We're going to begin by printing this. Okay. We're going to begin by having our please input our positive integer, blah, blah, blah. That fun stuff. And then we have to have a while game is on. All right, now we don't have any field game is on, but we can go and make it private static Boolean game is. We don't want that. That's a bad idea. We want to declare it here. Int FizzBuzz number, Boolean game is on equals true. Okay, so we're going to start while the game is on. Okay. And then we can go and say, okay, FizzBuzz number equals console input dot next int. And we get rid of that one because we don't need it anymore. And now if we say, okay, if our FizzBuzz input is less than 1, Please input a positive integer. Input -1 to quit. That's nice. So if we go and we play it, at least what's going to happen is we save it and we play it. Okay, we do -1. Please input a positive integer. Input -1 to quit. Okay, we don't need to do that. We can just go and learn and where we say continue. What that means is that you skip everything else that might be in this loop ever and go straight to here, continue, and do it all over again. So if we go and we say continue, then what's going to happen is please input a positive integer, input -1 to quit. Okay, so I'll type -1. Well, it didn't quit because we didn't deal with it. -3, okay, do that again, 0, okay, -5, okay, 3. Okay, so now nothing happened because no matter what, it's just going to keep on looping as long as the game is on. So what we'll do is we can say, okay, if FizzBuzz number is less than 1, continue while, okay. What if FizzBuzz number, if FizzBuzz number equals -1, then we can say game is on equals false. Okay, is that going to work? And then we go put else. And otherwise, if it's a negative number, it'll just do that. Does that work? Okay, we'll get rid of that because that's just a duplicate. We save and we run. Okay, input -1. Let's see, does that quit? Okay, that's nice. We can say, okay, game is on equals false. That's nice. Now we can go and say, I don't know, system.out.println. Thanks for playing. We can give a smiley face. Okay. Now we can be polite on our exit. And okay, so we input -1, and now we say thanks for playing, smiley face. Great. So now we know that inputting -1 quits the game. And we're not testing this one because we're dealing with the console input. So we're not doing this console logic, but we're going to have to keep on seeing, okay, if this will work. If we'll continue if it's less than 1. If it is -1, then we just don't play anymore. Else if, or just else, system.out.println FizzBuzzer.FizzBuzz FizzBuzz number. Very nice. And it's already gotten us everything that we need. So now we play our game. We save it. Okay, so we'll play 1. Okay, 1. All right, that's a little bit. It's not cool, but okay, so 3, it'll print fizz, and 5, it'll print buzz, and 15, it prints fizz buzz, and 4, it prints 4. But what happens if we do, I don't know, system.out.print your fizz buzz result is colon space, and then we can print line fizz buzz number, and then just print a blank line to give us a little more space. How about now? If we want your FizzBuzz result is, so we'll say 3. Okay, your FizzBuzz result is fizz. Okay. 5, your FizzBuzz result is buzz. 15, FizzBuzz result is FizzBuzz. 2, your FizzBuzz result is 2. We input -1, we quit, and that is our code. That is our code. You can see what it is that we've done. In our next installment, I will show you what it is you can do to actually push your code up to GitHub. And we'll practice a little bit with Git repositories. We'll practice a bit with how to use Git and so on. But right up to this point, we've just focused a bit on how to drive development of an app by using tests. And here we've done, I don't know how many tests it was, 10 tests to help us get our FizzBuzz app and FizzBuzzer working. I hope this has been helpful for you guys, and I'll see you next time.